Welcome back to Tony Style Motivation, where we don't just talk about relationships, we reclaim our emotional power in them. Today's message is for the warriors who have done the work, held the silence, stayed grounded, and now the avoidant is finally inching closer again. But now comes the real challenge. How do you handle that moment, that tender, shaky return, without pushing them away? This isn't about playing games. This is about holding your power when connection finally starts to show up. Because what you do right now, in this fragile, delicate moment, will either deepen the bond or start the cycle all over again. So if you're ready to stop repeating patterns and finally hold that connection from a place of strength, let's dive in. That moment they come back into your space, maybe it's a soft message out of nowhere, maybe it's a check-in, maybe they show up at your door with that same old energy like nothing happened. That's the moment your entire nervous system lights up like it's been waiting for this signal the whole time. And in some ways it has. You've been doing the work. You've been holding back. You've been waiting, hoping, wondering if they'd finally come closer. And now that they are, every part of you wants to grab, wants to secure, wants to say, yes, finally we're back. But listen to me, this is the most fragile moment in the entire dance. And most people blow it, not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Because that energy they've been bottling up, all the emotion, all the missing, all the fantasies about how they'd return, it comes flooding out the second that avoidant gives a single inch. And if you're not grounded, you'll drown both of you in it. What you have to understand is this. Just because someone steps closer doesn't mean they're ready for the full intensity of everything you've been holding inside. Your inner world might have been spinning non-stop, but theirs hasn't. They've been operating from a different rhythm. And the avoidant, they don't trust closeness like you do. So when they come near, it's not a leap, it's a toe dip. And if your reaction comes on like a tidal wave, they feel one thing: threat. It doesn't matter how loving your words are. It doesn't matter how kind or excited you seem. If the energy underneath is urgent, they'll pick it up like a radar. And urgency feels like pressure. Pressure feels like loss of space. And that's when they retreat again. So if you want this moment to build something real, if you want connection instead of another cycle of distance, then you've got to learn the art of restraint without repression, of responding instead of reacting. So when you feel that emotional surge come up, that need to say everything, to ask for clarity, to make sure they don't leave again, you pause. You breathe, you notice, you witness the energy rising in your body, and you remind yourself, this is just a trigger. This is just my nervous system trying to protect me. You don't need to silence yourself. You just don't obey the panic, because this is the truth. Mastery is not about not feeling. It's about not letting those feelings lead the moment. Power is found in the space between stimulus and response. And in that space is where your breakthrough lives. That's where you shift the dynamic. That's where you break the cycle. See, an avoidant expects the old pattern. They expect intensity. They expect questions. They expect you to pull harder the moment they inch in. But when you don't, when you hold steady instead of reaching, they start to experience something they're not used to: safety. And safety doesn't come from control, it doesn't come from proving. It comes from you being rooted in your own emotional energy, so rooted that you can hold space without demanding anything. That's how you change the game. You become the calm in the storm, the stillness in the tension. You feel the rise of the old instinct, and you don't move. You don't flinch. You don't collapse into reaction. Because you understand now, the real power doesn't come from getting closer faster. It comes from holding the door open without chasing them through it. And when you do that, when you choose your groundedness over your craving, you don't just keep them near, you start to teach them what real connection actually feels like. Calm, steady, safe, and free. So now they've inched back in. You didn't chase, you didn't panic, you held your ground. And now you're in that strange, electric space where things start to feel almost right again. The messages are coming in, the conversations are light but meaningful, and for a moment it feels like the door is opening. And this is where most people ruin it, not out of malice, but out of that deep human need to know what's happening. The mind kicks in. It wants to define, to label, to wrap this uncertainty into something you can hold. You start thinking, are we talking again? Are we getting back together? Should I ask what this means? But let me tell you right now, asking what this moment means is exactly how you crush its potential. See, the avoidant isn't back because they're ready for a deep conversation about labels. They're back because, for just a second, they felt safe enough to come closer. And the moment you wrap that in a box called "Where is this going?", you trigger their core fear, expectation. Now it's no longer a reconnection, it's a contract. Most people don't realize how quickly they shift from curiosity to control, from presence to pressure, and pressure doesn't always sound like "let's define this". Sometimes it sounds like hope in your tone, like hesitation in your silence, like disappointment in your body language when they don't reply the way you imagined. Avoidants feel that energy even if you never say a word. What they need to feel is something they rarely experience, someone who doesn't need to own the moment. Someone who doesn't demand a destination for every step. Someone who can just be with what is, without grabbing at it. You've got to stop trying to make the moment mean something. Just because they sent a text doesn't mean they're ready to move back in. Just because they showed emotion doesn't mean they want to start over. And if you try to make every gesture into a symbol, you lose the power of presence. You lose the magic of what's actually happening, because you're too busy trying to force it into what you wish was happening. This is where emotional maturity comes in. This is where you separate from the crowd. You don't need to label every interaction. You don't need to squeeze meaning out of every gesture. You can sit in that beautiful discomfort, the uncertainty, and let it unfold on its own. That's what makes you powerful. That's what makes you magnetic. Because instead of giving them the old energy they expect, the energy that needs answers, that needs reassurance, that needs to know, you become the person who doesn't need to control the pace. You become the space where they can just feel without fear. And I know how hard that is. I know what it feels like to want clarity, to want to anchor into something solid, to want to know where you stand. But that's your work, not theirs. You're not here to force clarity out of another person. You're here to be clear in yourself, regardless of what they do. So instead of asking, what does this mean, ask yourself, how do I want to show up right now? Can you be calm without control? Can you stay open without attachment? Can you be fully present without turning presence into pressure? If you can do that, you change everything. Because most avoidants have never experienced someone who could stay connected without demanding a story around it. And when you give them that, when you let the moment breathe, they begin to trust something they don't even understand, your energy. You're showing them that connection doesn't have to be a trap, that presence doesn't have to lead to pressure, and that maybe, just maybe, being close to someone doesn't have to come with a cost. That's how trust is built. Not through asking for more, but by learning to hold what's there fully without needing to label it. That's when the connection finally gets a chance to grow. When someone who's avoidant starts stepping closer, your instincts scream at you to jump in, to meet them with full force, to show them you're still there and that you're ready to reconnect. And that's human. That's your heart responding to a glimmer of hope, to an old rhythm trying to restart. But if you match their subtle approach with overwhelming intensity, if you leap while they're still tiptoeing, you don't bring them closer. You scare them right back into retreat. This is the moment where alignment matters more than anything. Not emotional intensity, not strategy, energetic alignment. You have to learn how to mirror their pace, not because you're playing games, but because you're choosing to honor the space they're operating from without abandoning the strength of your own. If they reach out once a week, you don't respond with 7 texts a day. If they open up a little, you don't pour your entire heart out. You give a little too, just enough to reflect their level of emotional safety, not more. Because what you're doing is not withholding, it's respecting the tempo. You're stepping into a rhythm that makes them feel safe enough to keep going. That's how trust builds. That's how connection grows. But let's be clear, mirroring someone's pace doesn't mean shrinking yourself. It doesn't mean becoming passive or waiting around or pretending you don't care. That's not power. That's self-abandonment, and we're not here for that. Your job isn't to become smaller, it's to become more precise. To respond, not react. To stay connected to your truth while still meeting the moment with clarity and calm. So when they inch forward, you stay still, centered, powerful, and then take a step that matches, not one that overwhelms. You become the mirror that reflects safety. You don't amplify their caution, you ground it. You don't escalate their fear, you ease it. And they start to realize, this person doesn't want to control me, they actually understand me. That's rare. That's disarming. That's what starts to melt the defenses they've spent years building. Because remember, avoidants aren't wired to trust closeness. They've got a lifetime of programming that tells them intimacy means losing themselves. So, the moment they feel your energy charging forward, even with good intention, it doesn't feel like love to them. It feels like pressure, it feels like the beginning of a trap, and their nervous system doesn't pause to rationalize that. It just pulls away. So you have to become a master of emotional timing. You've got to notice their pace, not their words, their energy, and respond in a way that says, I see you, I'm not rushing this, I'm not starving for this, I'm grounded and I'm good. And when you do that, they feel something they almost never feel in relationships. Peace, not demand. Not pressure, just presence, and that presence, calm, grounded, and self-sufficient, is exactly what calls them into deeper connection. Not because you manipulated them, not because you played it cool, but because you held your own energy with so much clarity that they trusted it. That's how you lead without force. That's how you invite without chasing. And that's how you shift from being the one who's trying to hold it all together to being the one who knows they already are. Because, at the end of the day, this isn't about keeping someone close. It's about staying close to yourself. It's about moving in a way that honors your nervous system, your truth, your peace, while still respecting where the other person is emotionally. You don't lose anything by matching someone's pace. You gain perspective, you gain patience, you gain power. And most of all, you gain clarity on whether this connection is actually strong enough to walk forward with you. So when they step in slow, you breathe, you stay open. You meet them at the level they're capable of, and no more. And in doing that, you give the connection a chance to grow without suffocating it. That's how you lead without pushing. When someone avoidant starts to come closer, it stirs something deep inside of you. The silence that once screamed in your head gets replaced by a rush of emotion. And at first, it feels like hope, like something is finally shifting. But underneath that surface-level relief, there's a storm waiting. All the fears you pushed down while they were distant come roaring back the second they step in. The fear they'll leave again. The fear this is temporary. The fear that now that they're here, you have to do everything right to keep them. This is the emotional weight we don't talk about enough, because it's easy to think that once they return, the pain will end. But the truth is, when they inch closer, the emotional load doesn't disappear, it doubles. Now it's not just about what they're doing, it's about how you handle what's happening inside you. And this is where most people slip. They believe that now that the avoidant is opening up, it's time to finally let it all out, every suppressed emotion, every unanswered question, every stored-up need. But here's the problem. If you start outsourcing your emotional regulation to someone who's still figuring out how to regulate their own, you're setting both of you up for another crash. Because the second they feel like they have to carry your emotional storm, the second you unconsciously hand them the job of making you feel secure, they shut down. Not because they're cold, not because they don't care, but because their system wasn't built to hold both their discomfort and yours at the same time. And if you haven't anchored yourself before they show up, if you haven't processed your own surge of emotion, you will flood them with everything they ran from in the first place. That's why your work isn't about what to say or how to say it. It's about how you manage you. When that emotional wave hits, and it will hit, you have to know how to ride it without expecting them to catch you. That's what changes the dynamic. You breathe, you ground yourself, you feel the triggers rise, and instead of reacting, you become present to them. You get into your body. You go for a walk. You journal. You talk to a coach, a friend, someone who won't feed your panic. You don't rush to text them. You don't dump it all on their doorstep hoping they'll clean it up, because that's not love. That's dependency masked as connection, and I'm not saying your emotions don't matter, they do. I'm saying your healing isn't their responsibility. Your peace is not something they owe you. It's something you build day by day by becoming the source of your own emotional steadiness. When you do that, when you hold yourself steady no matter what they're doing, you shift from anxious to anchored. You stop being the person they feel pressure from, and you become the presence they feel safe around. And that changes everything, because now they can come forward without the fear that they are about to be swallowed whole. They can speak without worrying your response will explode into need. They can connect with you, not with a swirling storm of unmet expectations. You stop being someone they have to manage and become someone they can lean into. That's power, that's maturity. That's the version of you that doesn't just want connection, it knows how to hold it. You don't calm the dynamic by controlling the other person. You calm it by regulating the chaos inside you, so that when they arrive, you're not needing them to fix your feelings, you're inviting them into a space that already feels whole. You have to become the calm you've been looking for in them, because only when you stop handing them the job of keeping you regulated, do they finally feel free to keep coming closer. That's how you stop chasing reassurance and start radiating security. One of the biggest mistakes people make when an avoidant starts coming closer is thinking they've reached the finish line. That now things are good, safe, solid, and all they have to do is make sure the connection doesn't slip away again. And what happens without even realizing it? They shift from being present to being performative. Every interaction starts carrying an invisible weight, an unspoken "where is this going?" tucked behind every smile, every text, every moment shared. But here's the thing, avoidants don't pull away from love. They pull away from pressure, from the expectation that closeness now means responsibility, from the invisible contracts that say, now that you've come closer, I expect you to stay, to explain, to reassure me, to fix what happened. That pressure, even when silent, is loud as hell to them. It's felt. It's in your tone, your pause, your eyes when they take a little too long to respond. It's in your reactions even when you try to hide them. And the more they feel it, the more they begin to withdraw. Not because they don't care, but because they feel like they are about to be consumed again. Not by you, but by what love always seemed to cost them. Their space, their autonomy, their emotional safety. And if you're not aware of your own energy in that moment, you'll think they're being cold or distant again, when really they're just reacting to an atmosphere that suddenly got heavy. This is why presence, real, grounded, unpressured presence, is everything. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's not about acting casual. It's about removing the hidden need behind every action. It's about showing up without making every moment carry the weight of your past or the burden of your expectations. When they come closer, don't rush to define the relationship. Don't try to figure out what it all means. Don't use their return as an opportunity to fix all the emotional loose ends. Let them be in the moment with you without feeling like every step forward comes with a silent demand attached to it. Because when they feel like they're being pulled into a space where they can breathe, where they're not being asked to be everything all at once, something opens up in them. And that thing that usually shuts down, that protective shell, it begins to loosen. They start to trust that they're not going to be suffocated again. That love doesn't have to equal intensity, that being with you doesn't require them to lose themselves. And that only happens when you've done the inner work to separate your presence from your pressure. When you know how to sit with your own discomfort. When you can stay connected to them without turning that connection into a job they now have to maintain. That's when they feel the shift. That's when they start to experience love differently. The truth is, we all want to be received as we are. Not as someone's fantasy, not as someone's solution, and the avoidant is no different. They're just more sensitive to the cost of connection. So, your job in that moment isn't to offer more, or to fix anything, or to lock them in, it's to stay steady. To offer presence that isn't laced with fear, to sit across from them open-hearted and not make them responsible for your peace of mind. It's in that quiet confidence, that space of emotional self-leadership, where the real bond starts to form. Not forced, not demanded, but naturally from a place of safety. And I'll say this again, you don't have to suppress what you feel. You just don't use your feelings as leverage. You express without expectation. You stay open without leaning so hard you fall over. You communicate not to get a specific result, but because it's who you are, clear, grounded, authentic. That's the presence that changes the game, because when you remove the weight of now what? When your energy says, I'm here and I'm good whether this becomes something or not. Well, that's when they feel the freedom to stay. Not because you held them tighter, but because you gave them the rare gift of closeness without pressure. And in that space, connection stops being something they fear and starts becoming something they trust. When an avoidant starts moving toward you again, showing up, reaching out, giving you that glimpse of warmth, there's a very specific emotional trap that opens up. And it's subtle. It sneaks in through the side door of hope. Because you want to believe this time it's different. This time they've changed. This time it means something real. So what do? You drop your guard. You let go of everything you were standing strong in. You slide right back into the fantasy, the version of them you were holding onto during the silence. And here's the truth no one likes to admit. We don't fall for avoidance because of who they are. We fall for them because of who we imagine they could become. We create a highlight reel in our minds, built from moments of charm, chemistry, and crumbs of connection, and we ignore all the inconsistency, the avoidance, the emotional unavailability that's been there the whole time. So when they come back, even just a little, that fantasy lights up again. We see what we want to see, and in doing that, we start abandoning ourselves all over again. But this moment, this return, it's not a sign to resurrect the fantasy. It's a call to remember your standards. You don't get swept back into the story. You anchor into reality. You ask, what's actually changed? Are they showing up differently? Are they consistent now? Or am I just so relieved they came back that I'm ignoring the part of me that knows better? Because your power isn't in their return, your power is in how you respond to it. You're not here to reward proximity. You're here to receive real, aligned connection, the kind that's mutual, the kind that's consistent, the kind that's earned through action, not assumed through memories. And this isn't about being cold. It's about being clear, because people who live in fantasy tend to explain away red flags. They minimize emotional distance. They confuse chemistry with compatibility. But people who are anchored in standards, they ask better questions. They don't just get excited that someone came back. They observe how they came back. They don't rush to rebuild the old dynamic, they pause and see if the new one is even worth building. This is where you've got to be ruthless with your own growth. You didn't survive the pain of distance, the confusion, the emotional highs and lows just to fall for the same cycle again. You've done too much work to let nostalgia trick you into starting over with someone who hasn't actually changed. So when they return, let it remind you of your worth, not reignite your wishful thinking. Let it sharpen your discernment, not cloud your judgment. You can be happy they reached out. You can enjoy the connection, but don't romanticize breadcrumbs. Don't call inconsistency healing. Don't mistake movement for transformation. Your heart might still want to believe the best in them. That's okay. But your job now is to balance your heart with your standards. Because love without standards isn't love, it's surrender. And you didn't come this far to surrender your peace just because someone finally decided to give you the attention you deserved all along. So if they're really ready, great, let them prove it, not in words, not in promises, but in presence. In action, in consistent emotional follow through, and while they do that, you stay grounded, you stay present. You stay clear on what you will and won't accept, because your worth isn't up for negotiation. Your peace isn't a reward someone gets just for coming back. It's a standard they have to rise to, and if they do, amazing, but if they don't, you're still good. Because you're no longer available for halfway love. You're no longer entertained by old patterns dressed up in new timing. You're not looking to finish an old story, you're writing a new one. And that new story starts with one simple commitment. No more fantasy, only reality. No more settling, only standards. That's how you move forward without getting pulled back. You don't need to force closeness. You don't need to beg for consistency. You just need to become the kind of presence that doesn't chase, doesn't crumble, and doesn't collapse even when the thing you wanted finally returns. Because when you master that moment, you don't just protect the connection, you protect yourself. This is Tony style motivation, and this is how you rise.